Hello listeners, welcome back. It's season 12. Yes, 12, count them. 12 years of the Ubuntu podcast, and this is episode 10 of season 12. Today we're going to be meeting the forkers, and we're going to have some command line love and go over your feedback. And joining me are Mark.
Hello.
Hello there, are you well?
I am quite well. I'm still a bit achy from my adventures crawling around in the loft, but you heard about that last week.
And Alan.
Hello, hello.
Have you been crawling around in the loft?
No, of course not. No.
What have you been up to?
I have been playing with i3 Window Manager.
Are you ill?
No, I've seen other people rave about it a lot, and I've seen colleagues use it, and they seem pretty quick, and I quite like keyboard-centric desktop environments. And on one of the old ThinkPad X61s, I thought, I could try out this i3 thing.
One of the army of old ThinkPads that's in desperate need of a lightweight desktop environment.
You could say that, yes.
Okay.
And I thought I'd try it out, so I installed Ubuntu and then put i3 on it. And then I was presented with a black screen, and I thought, oh, that's worked then. And then I had to go online and print out some handy cut out and keep keyboard layout guides, because I had no idea how to operate this thing. And there's like no window controls on the screen, and menus are non-existent. So you have to kind of know what you're doing. And so, yeah, these are my printed sheets that I have near my desk, because I can't even remember how to exit from the desktop.
Is it like Vi?
A little, yes. I mean, to exit, you have to do Super Shift E to exit. If you want to kill a window, it's Super Shift Q. And if you want to start a terminal, it's Super Enter. And if you want to, oh my gosh, it's mad.
So look, listen, I keep hearing, you need to be running i3 or Awesome or insert name of other tiling window manager. Is it really a panacea? Is it some kind of productivity boon that I'm just not getting?
So my opinion is, you can't say that you don't like oysters if you don't taste at least one oyster.
Fair.
And so I have now tasted the oyster that is i3WM, and I feel it's got a little bit of sand in it.
Yeah. Would you rather it had been grilled before you tasted it?
I feel like it could have had some garlic, maybe, and a bit of butter. a bit of extra embellishment might have been nice, but that's as far as the analogy goes. It's fun, and I like learning something new, especially keyboard-centric stuff. But and I'll probably leave it on that machine, but I'm not sure I will switch any of my main machines to it.
So on that i3 sucks bombshell, let's move on with the rest of the show. So with the news that Antergos is being discontinued, we thought it was time to meet the forkers, which is the interesting phenomenon which happens in the open source world, where a project that is struggling for community contributions fades away through lack of community contributions, and then immediately afterwards a community stands itself up behind the death of the project that has just announced it's going away. So Antergos is the most recent example. Why does this happen?
Is it human nature? Is it that we like using the thing we're using, and we're quite happy? It's the old 99%, 1%, 99% of people don't do anything, and the 1% are doing all the work getting the thing made. And it's not until there's this tension and fear that the thing might be taken away from you that it's at that point people start protesting and getting upset and figuring they have to do something. But all the while that other 1% of developers and maintainers are doing the work, you don't actually have to lift a finger, because all that stuff is being done for you. It kind of strikes me as similar to when brands say they're going to discontinue a particular chocolate bar. Now, sometimes that's done very much as a marketing ploy, and sometimes it's the they just didn't sell very well. But the people who love that thing, chocolate bar, washing powder, toothpaste, whatever it is, well, let's be real, it's never going to be washing powder or toothpaste, but that chocolate bar or flavour of crisps, people like it and they want it to carry on being there, and they're only going to protest. Like nobody ever tweeted, "Oh, I sure hope they don't get rid of Snickers bars." Like it's not until it goes away that people start protesting. Do you know what I mean?
So Heinz have done this quite successfully a few times. I remember they threatened to discontinue salad cream.
That's right.
Which resulted in mass hysteria and bulk buying of salad cream. Is this the same phenomenon?
I think so.
Yeah. It's infuriating, though. As all of us, I mean, Mark's involved in Moodle, so you're, committed to that platform on a day-to-day basis through work.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, Alan and I through Ubuntu and various spin-offs from the Ubuntu community. But it's infuriating. Antergos is a project that I contributed to when I was in the Arch Linux community. And I think the 3 people that were basically running Arch Linux, Antergos, I know all 3 of them. And I can understand why they've run out of time. But I don't understand why people that really care for, in this case, Antergos, are not choosing to get involved in some meaningful way whilst the project is alive and healthy, and wait until, the death knell is called, to suddenly get behind the idea.
So on the forum, a group of the Antergos forum, this community have rallied around a new project which they're calling Endeavour. And I think there's some other group who have another project which is similar, and they're coming together in order to build a new thing. But it just feels like too late. Like some people might argue, and there was a recent article which we don't need to go into, but where someone lamented the death of Antergos and others, suggesting that other distros should call it quits as well. And I don't understand why you have to wait until the thing is dead before you get mobilized. I guess people just don't feel bought into it. Like if I regularly purchased salad cream, I'm doing a monetary outlay, and I get a reward, which is delicious tasting sandwiches, right? But for Antergos or any other Linux distribution where you're not paying for it, you're not as bought into it. Like you're not as, you don't feel that sense of commitment to the project until it goes away. Because there's that sense of withdrawal. They're taking away the software from you. Do you see what I mean?
Well, there's sort of the opposite angle on this, is that our project's doing enough to bring in people and keep themselves sustainable? Because, I mean, we just spoke about how there were 3 people maintaining Antergos, but there's 6 people in this group who are going to start up Endeavour. And one of the things they said in their announcement is that the original developers or maintainers of Antergos don't want the new group using the Antergos name because it's their thing, which is kind of fair enough. If these 3 people are the ones who've been doing it up until this point and that's now ended, then it kind of makes sense they don't want someone keeping this name going on, which is nothing to do with them. But if they'd brought these people in earlier and created a sustainable community, then it would still be the same thing, even though it wasn't just those 3 people. So maybe it's more of a question of and to some extent with other projects this has happened with, some of it's, I mean, each project is different, and I don't know the Antergos project well enough to make judgments about it, but just the general sustainability of projects and the ability to onboard new users and not keep it as a closed group, I think is quite important in avoiding this happening.
There's also the problem that Linux distributions are a bit special in that anyone can create one, and there is always this churn of Linux distributions, and sometimes you have to throw your hands in the air and go, well, today it was your turn to die, and not all Linux distributions really should survive. I'm not pointing the finger that any that should go away, but bear in mind, in the last, Linux distro timeline, that nice, pretty picture that shows the lineage of Linux distributions. So in between October 2017 and April 2019, so that's 18 months. In that 18 months, 25 Linux distributions were discontinued, according to that resource, which is a fairly authoritative resource, right? And about 12 Linux distributions were added. So we are losing distributions over time. You know, I think we've got past that heady day of let's create a distro. And there are certainly a large number of small distros, but a lot of the bigger ones are falling away. I think partly because people move on and they find other hobbies. You know, people move on to makerspace, or they have kids, or they get a job that means they don't have as much spare time, or they have to travel or commute more, or whatever it may be. Maybe it's not such a bad thing that some of them go away.
I don't know. I mean, you're saying that, you know, the rate at which new distros are spawning is on decline, but that still sounds like an untenable number of distros to be come into being over an 8. That's like one every 6 weeks. Why is that? Why do we need a new distro every 6 weeks? I know that there is a place for new distros if you really think about what your use case and niche is.
Says the bloke who created one. Yes.
Well, I know, right? You could say that I fall into this category. I would argue that I don't, but I get that point, right? You know, lots of people at the time said you're just another Linux Mint.
Yeah.
I think over time, maybe I've proven not quite another Linux Mint, but yes, there are certainly some similarities there. But there are a lot of distributions that are just rehashes, like literally changing the look and feel and tweaking at the edges of already existing distributions and presenting themselves as something new and different. And they're really not. They are, you know, riding on the coattails of work that's been done by other people.
Well, they all are, arguably. Like, we ride on the coattails of what the Debian developers did and ride on the coattails of all the people before us.
No, so I don't think that's fair, right? So definitely Ubuntu benefits a lot from Debian, right? We get all of that, you know, that packaging effort from all of those thousands of Debian developers that make up the foundations of the packages that we build our operating system on top of. But if you install Debian, any of the desktops that they support in their installer, and then compare that to the desktop options that exist in Ubuntu, what you have in Debian is very much a distribution, a Linux distro as it was defined, you know, in the past. And with the Ubuntus, I feel like it's more like a product. People are thinking about end users and use cases and refinement and all of that stuff. And Debian just feels like a collection of packages.
But I think going back to your previous point, you said, like, what are we doing wrong? And I think there certainly are ways in which some of these Linux distributions, I don't think any of them don't deserve to exist. I mean, some of them are vehicles for someone to learn how to develop something, yeah, and they're learning how to use revision control systems, they're learning how to do build systems, they're learning operating system fundamentals. So even if nobody uses the distro, the individual who made it is going to learn things from it and they're going to benefit. So there's always some benefit to a Linux distribution existed, even if there's not millions of users, right? But I do think we fail in open source and specifically in Linux distros at mobilizing and incentivizing people to contribute. We certainly did a lot of good work in the early 6 years of Ubuntu. We had a massive community and a lot of people contributing, and a lot of that has tailed off for numerous reasons. And we've talked before, lamented about, you know, where people go when they leave and, you know, having children and work and all that kind of stuff. But I do think we're all pretty terrible at onboarding new people and incentivizing new people to get involved and making it easy for new people to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a challenge. I mean, I know it's something that I struggle with, both in terms of Ubuntu Mate and the Mate desktop, is how do you, first of all, find the time, you know, with the constant march of, you know, technology and keeping up with the changes beneath you. there's precious little time to think about other people who might want to get involved in the project that you're working on. There's a lot of assumed knowledge there as well.
What happens in the Moodle world, Mark, where, is Moodle is it like Ubuntu where it's centrally controlled mostly by a corporate entity with external contributors? And how do those external contributors come in, or is it all fully community driven?
No, I think there's quite a lot of parallels with Ubuntu in that there's a central company behind it that then sort of orchestrates the community contributions into the core product. But then there's a lot of the plugins are just community projects which have other people contributing to them, and so they in themselves become an open source project which can have the same sort of problem. I mean, I have in the past released my own plugins and I've had contributors to them, but then I've not needed to maintain those anymore, and so they've sort of sat there and people are still trying to use them and still reporting bugs against them, but because I don't need them, it's kind of orphaned now. And occasionally someone will come and take it and start maintaining it themselves, but there's the same sort of problem to an extent, but it's quite a different shaped problem to one of Linux distributions, I think. And I think, with the Moodle community, it's a lot more likely that someone who's worked on something else can just pick up something that's orphaned and sort of give it enough love to keep it going if they need it, rather than, I think, a distribution is a much bigger commitment, perhaps, especially if you're only one or two people.
Right. And we had this with Ubuntu Touch, back in 2017 when we deprioritized Unity and stopped developing Ubuntu Touch. Thankfully, the UBports guys were there to pick it up, and they'd self-motivated, self-funded. They had someone who injected some money and was interested to see Ubuntu Touch reach further than we ever got it. We shipped devices, but we didn't ship a huge number of them. And we got an awful lot of software built to make a phone stack working. But then we stopped. And because we stopped, it could have gone one of two ways. It could have just, sat there on Launchpad and never, no more revisions. But thankfully, it went the other way because there was a community there already to pick it up and start moving it forward. And I think that's partly because, we fostered that and we built relationships with the UBports guys. We could have done that a lot better. And I think that's part of the problem is Linux distributions don't know how to do that really, really well. That fostering a community and keeping people engaged, because it's hard enough turning the handle and cranking out packages and cranking out ISOs and updating the website notes and replying to support requests and replying to security updates and all that kind of stuff, to then be able to respond to a student who says, hey, I'd like to patch this thing because it's broken, and how do I get started? And then try and onboard that person and then get them onboarding more people. It's a scale thing. It's really hard to scale your Linux distribution really wide unless you've got lots of people, and most of us don't do it very well.
Yeah, and I think sort of comparing that to the Moodle community, what you have in the Moodle community, because it's a web app and because it's in PHP, there's quite a low barrier for entry for just hacking on a patch.
What are you saying about PHP developers?
No, I'm saying about PHP as a language is very easy to pick up and hack on, basically. So we have a lot of developers who started off as users, either as students or as teachers, who then wanted to change something. And that means that the way the community kind of intermingles between users and developers is fairly unique, but it means that there's a lot of support there at all levels, which means if someone posts on the forum and says, I've got this, I've identified that if I can change this one line of code, it'll fix this massive problem for me, then there's someone there who can say, oh, okay, well, here's the steps you go through to get it in.
And I think Linux distributions actually suffer because we have tools that make it easy to build your own derivative distribution. If you think about it, things like the Ping iOS tools and the Remaster Sys and all these other tools that exist that can just take an existing installation or an ISO and jam a few extra packages in it and bam, you've got your new Linux distribution. That's easy because you're just respinning an existing one. But the other end of the scale is, what if you wanted to start a Linux distribution from scratch and actually create your own packaging format and host your own repository. And at that end of the scale, it's super, super hard. And because it's really, really easy for someone to just turn the handle and crank out an ISO, but it's really hard to do the right thing and create your own Linux distribution at the other end.
Well, hold on. No, that's not the right thing. What's the right thing is if it was as easy to create a derivative as it was to contribute back to the project in the first place. So rather than saying, well, I've got I want this one thing changed, so I'm going to make my own respin, you say, well, I'm going to contribute that back, and then I get it.
Yeah, you couldn't see my air quotes when I did right thing there. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
I'm working on a presentation for OggCamp and UbuCon, which is titled How to Make a Successful Linux Distribution. And step 1 is don't make a Linux distribution. And it actually is, to your point, Mark, which is find a Linux distribution that's already out there that aligns with what you're wanting to achieve and go and join that effort. Don't let ego get in your way, not like me. Go and find a distribution that you can get behind and go and contribute there, because we don't need more Linux distributions. What we need is more people contributing to the Linux distributions that we already have.
Yep, totally.
For our listeners, I'd be interested to know, what do you think that the Linux distro should be doing to bring people to their projects in order to sustain them? You can send your feedback to show@ubuntupodcast.org. And with that, we'll move on.
If you love the command line as much as we do, send us a command that will blow our minds, and we might even mention it on the show. Send your command line love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it is time for some command line love, and I do believe someone has reached inside the vault of love and grabbed something from it.
Yes, Ross B sent us an email. He said, here's one for the sporters of aluminium headwear among us. I recently found a sandboxing tool, FireJail, which is often used to restrict a program's access to certain files and folders, but it can also be used to deny its network access. So we'll show the command in the show notes, but you basically run FireJail with some arguments and then the name of your program, and it will run that program, but without access to your network.
Huh. And does it only limit network? Could you limit it like accessing files on your host or accessing your camera or stuff like that?
Files in your home directory, for example.
From what Ross said, I think, yes, this is one of the things it can restrict, but this is the particular use case he had where you've got like an old application which isn't maintained anymore, which is still useful, but you don't particularly want it possibly exposing vulnerabilities on your network.
Oh, cunning. I mean, I've heard of it. I've heard it used as a simile when people are talking about other things. They say, well, it's like FireJail. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I never knew what FireJail was until today. So, yeah.
So there it is. That's our command line love, FireJail. You'll find the details in our show notes. And now we're going to move on to the feedback.
If you love the command line as much as we do, send us a command that will blow our minds, and we might even mention it on the show. Send your command line love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
And Dr. Laura was right on the money. It is now time for your feedback. Roger Light emailed us.
I use KDE Connect to very easily send photos from my phone to my computer. I also find getting notifications on my desktop handy. Less frequently, I use my phone to control media players, including YouTube on my desktop.
Is this the start of a torrent of feedback about KDE Connect?
Well, let's see what the next bit is.
Okay, so TNT also emailed us at show@ubuntupodcast.org.
One obvious use you overlooked is transferring files to and from your phone without having to bounce off web services. That alone is very useful, and you're not limited to the terrible throughput of Bluetooth. It is true, however, there are no notifications I get on my desktop from the phone that I don't get on my Pebble Time Steel anyway, so that facility is not as useful.
And John the Nice Guy Spriggs also said,
I'm a little odd about this one, I'm sure, but the producer of my podcast, adminadminpodcast.co.uk, has mentioned in the past about my ridiculously noisy keyboard and mouse when I record the podcast. So I use KDE Connect on my Android tablet to move around our show notes, feedback, and so on.
And continuing the Please No More KDE Connect feedback, Brian Ackroyd also sang its praises.
Firstly, it's very useful for me to see my WhatsApp and Telegram notifications come up on my laptop. Sharing the clipboard between the laptop and mobile is very useful to me, though I think it's important to disable when it's not required for security purposes. Also, the transfer is facilitated not only between laptop and phone, but also phone to phone. You didn't mention it, but I believe GS Connect offers similar facilities for GNOME desktop. Now, yes, thank you everyone. In the various ways that you told me that there are ways to use KDE Connect, because I said in a previous episode, I don't see the use of it. And for all those people who said, like, they get notifications for, like, WhatsApp and Telegram, I have WhatsApp and Telegram on my laptop. So that's why I don't need the notifications from my phone. But I can appreciate everyone does things slightly differently.
Yeah, one thing which I noticed was that I used to use it for transferring files between my phone and my laptop, particularly when I took a photo. But now I've got, since then, the Nextcloud apps have been vastly improved. So I just use that now because I have my own Nextcloud server. But if you don't have your own Nextcloud server, then it's still very useful for that sort of thing.
I did try the Nextcloud box. I have one of the Raspberry Pi. Who makes them? Western Digital, Nextcloud, Raspberry Pi setup things, and I just found it a little bit too slow, but I think I was trying to send it all of my photos. But you're saying that the Android app has improved, has it?
The Android app and the desktop app have improved now, and the Android app has an instant upload feature as well. So as soon as I take a photo, and in fact, you can point it at different folders on your phone as well. So when WhatsApp gets a photo, it can automatically sync that to your Nextcloud as well.
I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
So in conclusion, a straw poll of 4 Ubuntu podcast listeners, KDE Connect is indeed extremely popular and useful, and we were probably wrong.
That was a small fraction of the feedback we got.
So Bibbit also left a comment on our website, ubuntupodcast.org.
I thought you chaps would be interested in the latest Steam box, and they link to a story about a Raspberry Pi powered by a mini Steam engine.
What?
This is a story from 3 years ago.
Oh, so it is. So it's not quite the latest Steam box.
It's a Steam box. It's literally a Steam box.
Well, when talking about Steam engines, the word latest...
If Andy Stanford Clark isn't aware of this, I feel like he would enjoy this.
And Tim from Michigan sent us an email at show@ubuntupodcast.org.
I backed the Librem 5 phone last year because I was so disappointed with the Ubuntu Touch project being shut down by Canonical. I think the world needs a free open source smartphone option with hardware shutoffs for camera and microphones, and Purism's selling of their laptops made me think the phone project would actually happen. Another delay in delivering the phone so many of us backed would be a disaster and made me lose all respect for Purism. Their obnoxious advertising for Librem 1 that you mentioned has already lowered my regard for their professionalism. It's a risk backing any crowdfunding project, but I try to walk the talk of my belief in true free market economics, not corporate enslavement, and I try to support entrepreneurs. If the Librem 5 is a success, I'll be purchasing one of Purism laptop as well. If they fail me by not delivering a phone this fall, to hell with them. Okay. Do you see any other FOSS solution for a smartphone on the horizon? One made by a company that knows how to design, manufacture and sell phones to the general public without lowering themselves to fraternity boy marketing? Yes, I do. I think you should seriously reconsider taking another look at Ubuntu Touch, now known as UbiPorts, on phones like the OnePlus One, which is still a super usable phone. But they have more modern phones available as well. The other thing that I'm super interested in is the Pine phone, because they seem to be doing it right. And I am quite looking forward to seeing how that device turns out. And it looks further down the rails than the Librem 5 is.
Yeah, a little peek behind the curtain on the Pine phone. They've really done a great job of engaging with the community and finding a community of developers that are interested in enabling a phone for Linux users. So they've got the hardware chops to produce this thing, and it really looks like that's going to be a device that's available this year. And what remains to be seen is if all of the community effort behind creating an OS for that phone can come together and meet the same timeline for delivering that hardware. But yeah, I'm really excited for the Pine phone as well. And finally, we just need to say a big thank you to Jason Armstrong, who sent us a most excellent picture of Mark's house.
We'll put that in the show notes.
If we had a laptop to give away as a competition prize, you would have most certainly won it.
And by picture, it's not a photograph taken from behind a bush across the road of Mark's house. It's a drawing that he did.
Yes, it's a comic book style illustration.
Yes.
It is not a million miles away from the truth either.
Maybe he was drawing it while looking through binoculars from across the road behind a bush.
And that's all for the feedback. And that's all for this, the 10th episode of the most amazing 12th season of the Ubuntu podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this show. We've got a couple of links that you might be interested in. So each of the presenters, we back a charity or support a charity. And if you go to ubuntupodcast.org/donate, you can find out each of the charities that we advocate for. And we would welcome your support for those. And Mark, who is about to become a first-time father, there's a community stood up GoFundMe for Mark's Baby Fund. We'll have links in the show notes for both of those. I would be delighted if you come along and support those initiatives. Until next time, we'll say farewell. You can come and join us in our Telegram group, ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram.